If you sit alone in a quiet room and listen carefully, you will notice something quite strange. You are never truly alone. There is always a voice, a commentary, a running dialogue inside your head. And here's the mystery. Who is talking and who is listening? Most of us live our lives in a conversation with ourselves. We narrate, judge, analyze, and anticipate every moment before it happens, replaying past mistakes and rehearsing future victories. But have you ever stopped to ask, who is this voice? This is not just a casual observation. It's the very foundation of your experience. Your entire world, your entire sense of self is shaped by this inner dialogue. And yet we rarely question it. Is the voice truly you? Or is it just a habit, an echo of past conditioning, a radio station that never turns off? And here's why you must stay with me. Because if you can understand the nature of this voice, if you can recognize what it is and what it is not, you will unlock something profound. You will see the world and yourself as they truly are. Most people believe they are their thoughts. But what happens when you try to silence the voice? It resists, doesn't it? It jumps in with another thought. Why am I doing this? Is this working? Am I doing it right? The chatter continues, and suddenly you realize this voice is not something you control. It happens to you. And if it happens to you, then who is the you experiencing it? This is where things get interesting, because once you see that the voice in your head is just a reflex, like your heartbeat or breathing, you no longer have to obey it. You don't have to take it so seriously. The moment you realize that, you are free. Free from the burden of self-judgment, free from the endless spiral of worry, free from the illusion that you are merely the thoughts inside your head. And here's the best part. When you no longer cling to the voice, you begin to hear something far greater. The sound of the wind through the trees, the subtle hum of existence itself, the symphony of life playing beyond the prison of words. So, my dear listener, the question is not, do you talk to yourself? Of course you do. The real question is, are you ready to listen beyond the voice? For in that space where thought dissolves into silence lies the greatest secret of all. Would you like to hear it? We are always engaged in an internal dialogue, yet rarely do we stop to consider what this means. From the moment we wake up, a voice is speaking within us, narrating the day before it even begins. It tells us what we need to do, reminds us of our worries, replays past conversations, and anticipates future ones. It is a constant, unrelenting stream of thought. But have you ever wondered who is speaking and who is listening? If you are the one generating these thoughts, then why do they sometimes seem to happen on their own without your control? If you are the listener, then who is the thinker? This is where the illusion begins. The voice in your head is not as personal as you believe. It is not truly you, but rather a collection of memories, habits, and conditioning gathered over time. It repeats what it has been taught, mimicking the voices of parents, teachers, society, sometimes criticizing, sometimes encouraging, but never truly original. It is an echo, a recording that plays in loops, reinforcing an identity you never consciously chose. And yet, we mistake this voice for ourselves. We obey its fears, chase its desires, and suffer under its judgments. But if we pause and observe, we realize something profound. The voice continues speaking even when we wish it would stop. It runs like a machine, independent of our will. This simple recognition opens the door to freedom. If the voice is just a habit of the mind, then we are not bound to it. We can step back and watch it like we would a passing cloud, without getting caught in its illusions. And in that space of awareness, something extraordinary begins to happen. The illusion of the separate self is one of the most deeply ingrained beliefs we carry. We move through life convinced that there is a clear boundary between me and everything else. This is reinforced by language, culture, and the very way our minds are conditioned to perceive reality. We say, I am thinking, as if there is a distinct entity inside us that produces thoughts. But have you ever stopped to question where this I begins and where it ends? Is it the body, the mind, the voice inside your head, If you were to search for this self, you would find nothing but an ever-changing stream of sensations, thoughts, and experiences. And yet we cling to the illusion of a solid, unchanging identity. The irony is that the very voice we identify with, the one constantly narrating our lives, is just an accumulation of past experiences, opinions, and learned reactions. It is not the true essence of who we are. Like waves in the ocean, thoughts rise and fall, but we are the vast space in which they occur. The problem arises when we mistake the waves for the ocean itself. We become entangled in the idea that we are separate from life, from others, from the very universe we are made of. This illusion creates anxiety, fear, and an endless search for something to complete us. But completion was never missing, only our awareness of it was. And the moment we recognize that the voice in our head is not the whole of our existence, a new kind of freedom emerges. We are no longer confined by the limitations of thought, but open to the vast, ungraspable reality beyond it. And in that openness, the self dissolves, leaving only the dance of existence itself. The mind is a restless storyteller, spinning endless tales about the past and the future. It clings to worries, replays regrets, and projects imaginary scenarios that may never come to pass. This is the trap of thought loops, cycles of self-talk that seem to control us rather than the other way around. You may have noticed this when trying to sleep, when your mind suddenly floods with unfinished conversations, embarrassing moments from years ago, or fears about what tomorrow might bring. The more you try to quiet it, the louder it becomes. But what is really happening here? It is not that the mind is malicious, it is simply doing what it has always done, trying to keep you safe by predicting, analyzing, and controlling. However, this constant thinking creates the illusion that you are your thoughts. That if you think something, it must be true, but thoughts are like passing clouds. They appear, shift, and disappear, yet we hold on to them as if they define us. The real problem is not the thoughts themselves, but our attachment to them. We believe that if we think long enough, we will find certainty, control, or resolution. But has worrying ever truly solved a problem? Has overanalyzing ever made you feel at peace? The irony is that the more we chase clarity through thought, the more we become trapped in confusion. The way out is not by suppressing thoughts, but by seeing them for what they are, just mental activity, like ripples on water. When we stop identifying with them, they lose their power. And in that moment of detachment, we find something we were always searching for, the silent presence beneath all the noise, the space where peace has been waiting all along. Silence is a rare thing in our modern world. Even when everything around us is still, the mind continues its restless chatter. We are so accustomed to living inside this stream of words that we hardly notice it. But have you ever paused to wonder what lies beyond thought? What remains when the voice inside your head grows quiet? The mind, by its very nature, tries to fill every empty space with words, memories, and projection. It labels, categorizes, and interprets everything we experience. But reality itself does not need labels. A tree does not call itself a tree. The ocean does not name its waves. These things simply are. It is only the mind that imposes a narrative upon them, and because we live in this mental narrative, we mistake our thoughts for reality itself. But the truth is, words are only symbols. They are useful, but they are not the things they describe. No amount of thinking about fire will ever burn your hand, and no amount of talking about love will ever replace the feeling of being in love. Yet we often confuse the map for the territory. When we rely too much on self-talk, we live in a world of abstraction, disconnected from direct experience. But when the mind becomes quiet, something extraordinary happens. The world reveals itself, not as a story, but as it truly is, vivid, alive, and immediate. The sound of the wind, the warmth of the sun, the breath moving in and out of your body, these things need no explanation. They simply exist. And so do you. And in that moment of pure presence, without the interference of words, you realize that life is not something to be figured out. It is something to be felt. The mind is an artist, constantly painting reality with the colors of thought. It shapes the world not as it is, but as it believes it to be. Every experience is filtered through the lens of self-talk, the silent narrator inside your head that interprets, judges, and defines everything you encounter. If you see a stranger, the mind immediately assigns meaning, friend or foe, attractive or unattractive, safe or dangerous. If you hear a sound in the dark, the mind fills in the blanks with fear or curiosity. But what if for a moment you saw reality without the filter of thought? What if you looked at the world without immediately labeling it? The mind resists this because it craves control. It wants to predict and categorize to maintain a sense of order. But in doing so, it creates a distance between you and life itself. Instead of simply experiencing the flow of existence, you become trapped in an endless interpretation of it. You don't just feel the rain, you think about it, compare it to past rains, decide whether you like it, and form a story around it. This is how self-talk separates us from direct experience. But the paradox is this: the more we try to control reality through thought, the less we actually experience it. To truly see, we must let go of the need to name everything. This does not mean rejecting thought, but rather recognizing its place as a tool, not a master. When you stop clinging to the mind's constant chatter, the world appears as it truly is, vast, interconnected, and beyond words. And in that space of pure presence, you realize that reality was never something to control, but something to dance with. The voice in your head is not your enemy, nor is it something to be silenced by force. It is simply a function of the mind, much like the beating of the heart or the flow of breath. The problem arises when we mistake this voice for our true identity, allowing it to dictate our emotions, decisions, and sense of self. But what if we could step back and simply observe? What if, instead of reacting to every thought, we could watch them rise and fall like waves upon the shore? This is where liberation begins, not by suppressing the voice, but by understanding its nature. When you listen without attachment, you see that thoughts are just ripples in consciousness. They come and go, yet something remains unchanged, the awareness that observes them. And that awareness is not bound by words, ideas, or fears. It is silent, spacious, and free. The beauty of this realization is that you do not have to force anything. You do not have to fix your mind or stop it from talking. Instead, you simply notice the voice without identifying with it. In doing so, you create distance between yourself and the endless chatter. And in that space, something profound emerges: clarity, peace, and a sense of being completely present. The self you once thought you were, the anxious thinker, the restless planner, begins to dissolve, revealing something far deeper. You realize that you are not merely the thoughts inside your head, but the vast open awareness in which they appear. And in that moment of recognition, you are no longer trapped in the illusions of the mind. You are simply here, fully awake, free to experience life as it is, beyond the limitations of thought. So, do you talk to yourself? Of course you do. But the real question is, are you aware of it? Are you in control, or are you being carried away by a river of thought that never stops flowing? The moment you realize that the voice inside your head is not the true you, a shift begins. You see that thoughts are merely passing clouds in the vast sky of awareness, and you no longer need to chase or resist them. This is not about silencing the mind by force, or escaping thought altogether. That would be like trying to hold back the wind. Instead, it is about seeing thought for what it is, a tool, a function, not your master. When you stop clinging to self-talk, life becomes clearer, lighter, and more vivid. You no longer live inside a mental story, but in direct connection with reality. The wind on your skin, the sound of laughter, the feeling of being alive. These things are not thoughts, they are life itself. And when you step beyond the noise of the mind, you discover something extraordinary: a deep and unshakable freedom. Not the kind of freedom that comes from controlling or fixing anything, but the freedom that arises when you no longer mistake the voice in your head for who you are.